This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Sort of had a realization whilst watching that pedal show with Robben Ford. So I've been chatting to Jake. Obviously, I'm good buddies with Jake, and once he could tell me about this was something that was super interesting to me. And of course, like, if there is one Dumble sound in my mind, it is the Robben Ford amp. So having watched other people play through that amp, you know, I'm not ever going to have the experience to play through that amp, I don't imagine. It's a really cool thing. And yeah, so I've this kind of Dumble thing has been something I've been interested in for quite a long time. And initially I got into this via kind of modeling, right? So I found that one of my favorite amp models in the Line 6 world was the Line 6 Litigator. I mean, before that even, I think I happened across the boutique amp models in the Pod. And those were the things that I've sort of found myself gravitating towards for a few things. In the real world, Mesa Boogie had been more or less where I kind of focused most of my amp attention. And then, yeah, from there, you know, you find that you can get kind of real world clones of the Dumble stuff. So the first experience I had of that, I had a Fuchs 4 Aces amplifier. Now, Andy Fuchs was one of the guys with, I think, like Red Plate and 2 Rock and some of those guys early on that were kind of important in getting some of these schematics out and degooping some of this stuff, for better or for worse. I mean, ethically, there might be some issues there. But anyway, then I sold that. It was too loud for home use. I had a Keriotone, or Cheriotone, however you say it, ODS50. And again, what I found with that, I compared it to my Mesa Boogie Mark III at the time for kind of drive stuff, that smooth drive thing. And I found that I think maybe for me, the Mesa was closer to what I had the sound in my head, and the Cheriotone was too loud really for home use again. Other amps that I've had in this realm, the VHT-D50, which is actually supposedly a clone of that Robben Ford specific schematic. Now I bought that one, and I actually found that drive channel a little bit easier to work with than the Cheriotone from memory. I sold it, and then I bought another one again recently because I thought, let's try this again. And again, really impressed with the amplifier and everything. It's just, I feel like there's something that maybe is just what I'm finding, that in the room with the clones, maybe this wouldn't be the case with the real amp, although I'm kind of hearing some of that same thing that I don't necessarily love about it in some of in those videos, hearing Mick, Dan, Jake and Charlie play through it. It's like got a really barky quality to it, and this is a thing that I didn't like with the Mesa Boogie Mark stuff live for kind of higher gain tones. So it's not, the single note stuff sounds amazing, but it's when you play like a couple of notes together, it kind of doesn't, I don't know, maybe it is that it's not compressing. There's something about it like that kind of, it just spikes out a load of mids, is what it sounds like to my ears. I don't have really good words for it, but either way, it seems to be a thing that to me is not necessarily what I'd love in a sound. So particularly like playing live music in a band and stuff, I'm quite, like, a lot of my tones have a lot of mids, you know, whether I'm using a model or anything. I'm quite sensitive to sort of like really spiky tones, and I say I are on the side of like blanketed tones. But what I don't like is that when you then start to play some chordal stuff, I don't want it to be like this really barky thing. So it's like a bit of a compromise where my lead tones will be a bit darker, but for the rhythm tones, I tend to then have to try and scoop from there. And maybe that's what I would have to do with a Dumble style amplifier to get the chord stuff to work. I think actually like the Marshall Governor has been like the best thing for this type of thing, a Boss Angry driver, where I don't think from the drive channel of a Dumble style amplifier I've really got that sort of thing. And even with the Mesa Boogies to some extent, I was left feeling like this is just a bit too barky for what I like. And the Mesas are also channel switching, so it's a bit of a complicated thing to get right. And I just feel like at this point, having tried what, 5, 6, a Two Rock Classic Reverb Signature, kind of Dumble-esque, and that for me was a really cool sounding clean. I've also played Jake's Two Rock SSS and his traditional clean, and both of those, all of the stuff in its own right, I think is really great. It's just I don't see myself owning them or using them, because for some reason, in the context that I'm playing, like using them live, which is like the context that I tend to try and evaluate an amp by, there's something about it which doesn't seem to work for me, right? I don't know, maybe they're too round sounding, although that's not, I think, what I'm hearing in that Robben Ford drive channel. So I think maybe it's time for me to kind of put to bed the idea of that searching for that Dumble tone. I know I speak with David Beebe about this quite a lot. We talk about like the extent to which amps are necessary, and I know Beebs has got kind of on his wish list something Dumble-esque, and probably, you know, neither of us are ever going to buy a real Dumble, but I think in the fractal world he uses a Dumble ODS clean for his kind of main bass. Personally, like for me, I use the litigator for a lot of my tones, and even for my live kind of hybrid rig, it's the Grammatico GSG100, which is a clone of that Robben Ford amp that I use when I'm playing live. So it's a bit of a strange thing for me. It's just, I think in that context as well, I'm using it with pedals. So would I ever use the drive channel on a Dumble amplifier? except in a situation where I can kind of take a bit more care with it. Would I be using it for rhythm tones? I don't think so. So I don't know, it's a bit strange. Another thing is that I feel like, as much as hearing some of these Dumble clones, they don't actually get as close to what I'm thinking of as the Zen Drive does. So I bought a Zen Drive recently. I'm now plugging into Tonex with the Joe Bonner Masters ODS that they bought off of him. So the clean sounds. I can kick on the Zen Drive. And it's actually getting me closer and more into the ballpark of what I feel like is my version of the Dumble sound than I've ever got with the real amplifiers in the room. Not that I've ever been in a room with a real amplifier, you understand what I mean, like with the clones. So maybe it's time to just say, right, I don't think I'm ever going to get there. I've got a 1965 Fender Pro Reverb. The clean on that is as good a clean as I've ever heard from anything else. If I stick the Zen Drive into that, I'm imagining that that Zen Drive, for whatever reason, sounds closer to what I think of as the Dumble sound and has a feel that I really like than I've ever got out of the actual kind of Dumble clones that I've tried. And it's also achievable at a volume that is manageable, right? So I'm at home here playing with studio monitors. On that pedal show, that amp was running, 105 kind of dB consistently around that level. Like, that's obviously loud enough to really damage your ears. That'd be useless for me on a gig, the gigs that I do. It'd be useless at home, and that has been basically the case. Like the Dumble style amplifiers, as much as I'd want them to kind of work for the context for me, I feel like the Zen Drive into either a Dumble style model or into a Fender style model kind of gets me close enough that, I don't know, maybe the search is over. Let me know your thoughts. Have you been down this kind of Dumble rabbit hole? I think it's a pretty enticing place. I think the idea that there are clones of these amps out there is also pretty enticing, although you hear people like Mick himself, who's got a TS1, which is a clone of that Robben amp. You hear Robben, who's had a couple of Dumbles, he sold one of them. I think even for him, like, that is the one amp that he's got that is the thing, not necessarily every Dumble amp. I think he played Larry Carlton's amp and said he doesn't like it. Jake's played a couple of Dumbles now, I think Mick has as well. I think they all tend to be quite different. In terms of searching for the Dumble sound, maybe it's a complete waste of time. For me, what I'm thinking, the Dumble clean sound to me sounds like a good Fender clean, and the drive sound worked for Robben live using a Zen Drive into a Fender style amplifier, when he couldn't take his Dumble around. And maybe that's what I should be thinking about more, rather than thinking about whether an amp would actually get me there. I think it's kind of It's not worked for me to this point. Why would it start to work? I think they're all going to be somewhat in that ballpark unless I could get Robben's actual Dumble, which is never going to happen. So the search necessarily might as well stop here, right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yeah, Tonex has a decent sounding set of captures for that Dumble stuff. But equally, Litigator I use an awful lot. Aristocrats in there in line 6 as well, and the Grammatico GSG100. As well as in the fractal world, there's a bunch of Dumble tones which are in there. Dumble amps are modelled from his actual Dumble as well. That might be one of the closer ways that you could get to this kind of experience. And even so, I think, like what Robben and Mick say, without being at an incredibly loud volume, maybe you don't even get to that Dumble experience anyway. So let me know your thoughts. It's over. The search is over. Call off the dogs. Cheers.